Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Atheniano Show. Today's episode is going to be about corruption in Nigeria, and my guest is a political observer based in Abuja, Chukwuka, who is joining me virtually. Now, before I jump into the episode, I just want to say that because we recorded it virtually and because we are recording from great distances away, there's always going to be problems with connectivity, Wi-Fi, and video. This time, out of our control, the video is a little bit choppy and for one point pauses for a significant amount of time. The audio quality, however, is great and you can perfectly understand everything. But to make the video a little bit more manageable to compensate for the quality, I've done some things like including subtitles throughout the entire video so that you guys can focus on that. But without further ado, I want to start the video and let you guys hear this fascinating conversation because it was really interesting. And for those of you who care about Nigerian politics, who care about sub-Saharan Africa politics, who care about just world politics, this will be a very, very, very interesting episode for you. So part 2 of my commitment to doing episodes on sub-Saharan Africa starts now. So I wanted to ask you the same question that I asked my previous guest, which is Nigeria has one of the largest oil reserves in Africa. I think the second largest oil reserves in Africa, and a lot of other natural resources, and yet 40 to 50% of their population is in poverty. Why is that, in your opinion?
To be honest, it's a mix of corruption and incompetency. We know what we have to do as far as utilizing our resources, and if we can't do it ourselves, then it's also in our best interest to recruit foreign nationals that know how to use these resources for us. But the kind of leadership that we have in Africa is one that is really just a bunch of corrupt and incompetent people in positions of power. And their corruption and their incompetency feeds off each other in the same way. So as much as they're corrupt, they're just as incompetent. If at any point in Nigeria's history, they tried to make any change, or they tried to make any difference as far as using our resources for our best benefit, they just didn't know how to do it. And that's the opinion that I stand on. Because there are so many economies outside of Africa that were oil-based who used their oil boom for their own gain and were able to show proof of using those resources in the ways that they used it, not just in improving the lives of their own people, but also in creating industries and a society that could still thrive on its own post-oil. Nigeria has not only missed our oil boom, but we're almost about to flatline as far as like new oil reserves and new like locations to find oil. The people in power know this though. They know just how finite of a resource oil is. They know just how exhaustible the oil revenue has been. In our own case, as far as like 250 million people, we're just too much. And yet there's still no change, no effective change that has shown us like we are people that have oil, such a very, very rich commodity in global like markets. So we should be able to see at least trickles of this money flowing into our economies. And we just haven't seen any of it in any way. Like we have little like projects here and there, like train stations, rail, a fancy like government building, small industry hubs. But compared to how much money we've made, like it's obvious, like even if they really wanted to like use this revenue for our good, they just don't know how to do it.
Can I ask quickly, where in Nigeria are you from and where are you located?
Okay, so I'm from the south. I'm actually from a state called Abia State, and it's in the south of Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
And right now I'm in the capital. I'm in Abuja.
Okay. And what tribe are you?
I'm Igbo.
Igbo. Okay. So my next question was going to be what can the people of Nigeria do to change the system, to change the incompetence and corruption from the leaders? Like, is there any hope that the people the people in Nigeria can do something to bring about change?
There is, and to be honest, it's not that much. Like I won't say it's like there are a lot of people here that have hope on changing the system. So many people have actually given up as far as like effecting the change. They're really just sitting back, just waiting to see just how far we can go and just misusing our funds and watching the whole country just waste away. And for the best part, like they're also waiting to see if the country will disintegrate into smaller like factions, smaller nations, maybe tribal nations. It's very hard to have hope only because this is a system that has been in place since 1960. So if we were to have a change, it should have been within those first, I say 10, 20 years after independence. And we did. We had a revolution. We had a coup where like one of the soldiers went and killed a great number of like elites in the military at the time and people that held power. And these people were very prominent people, not just to Nigerians, but also to their tribes. So that was supposed to be like a really big blow to the elite to show them like there are people who are not going to stand for this level of corruption and incompetency. But that coup and the war that followed actually just proved fruitless only because we didn't as a nation come together to like sit down and analyze just why it happened, how it happened, and the lessons we should learn and move on from after it happened. It was tagged the tribal coup because the leader and like most of his people that he took to carry out the coup were mostly Igbo. So a lot of people saw it as like an Igbo coup or like an ethnic clawback in a sense, like, oh, they really weren't doing it because they cared about the country. They only did it because they care more about their influence and their position of power within the country. After we fought the war, I think it was 3 years, 67 to 1970, we came back, reconciled, quote unquote, and we're supposed to move on into a new, like, set up a new, like, political system that allowed us to not only vote in people democratically, but also fill in people regardless of any ethnic or tribal sentiments. But the truth is we really didn't live up to those things. We tried because we preached it, we said it out loud, we came out to the open, we made people know like this is what we intended to do, this is how we intend to move forward. But because the people who were in power at the time that administered that reconciliation effort after the war were also very much corrupt themselves. It was just all talk, to be honest. It was just people just using everyone's emotions at the time to play themselves into power and to play us into docility, to play us into being relaxed and just laid back to allow them like take the reins of power and see what they could do. And that was another like 20 to 30 years of just pure corruption, the worst corruptions. In fact, now, as much as we are corrupt now, I feel like those like 30 years back or 50 or 40 years away from now, behind from now, were some of our worst years in power because not only were these people stealing, but they stole at the time where like we really, really needed improvement. We were really, really hoping that moving into the 21st century, into the 2000s or into the 1990s, we were going to match so many other countries who were just coming into their oil boom, who were just coming into their own economic prosperity and use the same lessons that they had learned from their own wars. Because around that time, there were so many other like wars and coups going around Africa and other places outside of Africa because this is the same time that so many of the emerging nations were coming out of colonial rule. So this was really our best time to like put our best foot forward and learn from all of the lessons. And not only we were learning, but every other nation just like us were learning. And the people in power at the time just used that moment and that movement to their best advantage to the point where like the system is broken and it's corrupt now, but it's so fixed in place that if we wanted to truly change it, we'd have to have another war to replace every one of the elites in their positions of power. And we also had to make sure that not only do we rid ourselves of all these corrupt elites, that we also administer and watch in the new set that come in to make sure that they don't take after like the traits of these former people and they don't use us the way these ones had used us before. But for us to even do that, it'll take national unity. It'll take people to come together and then put tribes, ethnicity, religion, gender, all kinds of divisions aside and say, as a people, this is what we want for ourselves. But the corruption has not only trickled from the top, it has seeped so deep into like the everyday society that these politicians, these elite, they can come out into the open and then buy out people. They can buy support if they wanted to. They can have a field of anti-protesters come to the protest to protest against the ones who came to protest. It's crazy because that's how it works. Like there are people who come out and say, okay, we want to march on the streets and say what this government of the day is doing is wrong. And they could run into another group of people who have been paid by these elite to come out and protest against the actual protests happening. It's that, or they could have the army come in and shoot people, scare them off, tear gas, all kinds of scare tactics just to get them to go back and silence them and shut them up. If they don't do any of these two, then they'll go into like the media. You'll have people, pundits come in, sit down, analyze the situation, and then call out everything that people see clearly, wrongly, just in support of the people who have paid them to make these assumptions, which is why it's very hard for the IMF, ICC, the UN, and all these international bodies who are watching Nigeria to really like pinpoint what exactly is going on, because there's so many smoke screens and so many psyops and people that they use to like twist the narrative and change like everyone's perception of what's going on. So much so that the people here themselves can't believe like this is like our reality. Like, what do you mean this like president is not corrupt? Like, have you seen the state of living since he came into power? Have you seen the scare tactics they use against people that speak against them? Have you seen the level with which they've been able to not only like subdue their opposition, but like stifle anyone that might have anything contrary to what they want to say or push out to the media? Like they go so far in defending all of this chaos and misappropriation and corruption that for us as a people, like when we look back or when we look at like the reality of what's going on, it's like this has to be a joke, because if you live here, you understand everything going on. Like it's clear as day what's going on. But they understand like there are people outside of Nigeria who are watching, who want to understand the Nigerian political system set up and why it's just this way for whatever reason. And they themselves can't understand it because these people are very well aware, like if there's going to be any true effective change in Nigeria, it'll have to happen from outside, because they've already succeeded in not only stopping any opposition, but like drowning out any voice that might come out against them. So their major focus now is just twisting how people see Nigeria and how they understand what's going on, to the point where they don't even have a coherent like understanding of what's going on in Nigeria. And that's it. So for us, as far as having hope, like we hope for the best, obviously, because we want the best to happen for us. But when it comes down to like the actions that we can take to really like bring about these changes that we want to see, our options are very limited, because if we wanted to go to war today or tomorrow, we know like there's going to be like counter groups or rebel groups or renegade groups that are going to like fight against the people who are fighting against the government. And to the outside viewers, the people who want to watch and understand what's going on, like it just wouldn't make sense. Like, why are there multiple people fighting themselves against the same people who are like in charge of them, who are controlling them? Like, why would you fight another like civilian for the government? Well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would the soldiers come to a protest and shoot at peaceful protesters who don't have any guns, who don't have any weapons, just marching on the streets with placards and signs? It doesn't make any sense. And then when they call them to like CNN or Fox News or wherever they like sit them down to have them explain just why these things happen, they're always very, very clueless. Like it's so obvious, like these people aren't just corrupt, but they don't have any justifiable means to show you or tell you why they do what they do. But they work so hard to make it so like confusing and hard to grasp, so that you can't at any point pin them down and say, okay, this is your crime, this is the role that you played, and so and so event, this is how you were able to do this and carry out this operation. It's all so muddied, and like the best analogy for like is a smoke screen. The closer and the more you look, the less you see, because they're so good at manipulating every voice, every opinion, every counter opinion, everything that is supposed to make sense just doesn't make sense anymore, because you can't understand why people who defend themselves living in positions like this, and at the same time they have people that are complaining, and then we all go to the polls to vote, and these are the people that we vote. It doesn't make any sense. Like it doesn't make any sense. There's no other way to put it. Like we can have the hope to change it, but then they're so good at manipulating everyone else's perception of us that in fact, if we wanted to even have that change, we would need some outside help to come in and not only like oversee all the events that are happening, but to be first-hand witnesses to the things that we're doing so that at least we can have a people or a group of people or an organization that can say, these guys over here, these people that are fighting against the government, they're right. And this is why they're right. We're able to see everything from the perspective and understand all the situations and difficulties that you went through their lens and see that they're in the right. If not, if that doesn't happen, then it just won't make sense to someone that's watching.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that like it's that the level of corruption is so embedded and so complex, and you mentioned that from an outside observer, it can be very, very hard to understand like what exactly that corruption, what exactly is happening. And like for me, when you're describing this, it's like my mind is like spinning because there's so many layers to it.
Yeah.
But my question is like, how did we get there? Like, how did the corruption become so? I mean, you mentioned the Civil War and the effects of that, but is it does tribalism play a factor into this? How does the level of corruption get so embedded into all parts of society?
It's really a mix, though. The thing is, when we moved from the military rule to civilian rule, all of the former like military heads and like high-ranking officials at the time all moved into civilian politics as well. It's not like they just bowed out of like politics or like leadership and just went home to like their people and lived normal lives. Like they all transitioned from like military heads of state and officers and colonels and sergeants into politicians. So they were able to carry the same template that they used in running like the military regime at the time into like civilian politics. Then there's a thing in Nigeria called Godfatherism. It's like the mafia, where you have like a mafia head and you have like a family and like everyone is obliged to like follow his lead and they have to pledge loyalty to him. The same thing happens in Nigerian politics. So when someone gets into power, they surround themselves obviously with their own people, their own yes men, their own like loyalists that not only like help them cover up their crimes, but also pledge loyalty to them for the long run. So even after these people leave offices, so say they do their 4 years or 8 years terms, when they leave these offices, they also have people that they install as like as their successors in the offices that they leave behind. But all of this is done behind the screens. The only reason why we know this so well is because we can see through the pattern of like the way things happen. Because you have an SA, which is like a special assistant, and your SA has like a league of people around him. As soon as you get into office, your SA and his like people all get into office as well. They appoint them into like different like ministries and federal bodies, and they all sit in these positions of power. As soon as you serve your term, say 8 years, 4 years, and you leave, these people also move up in positions of power within these appointed offices. Because some of these offices aren't elected offices. These are offices that are based off appointments. And as long as they're still sitting in these offices, in these establishments of bureaucracy, they still have as much power to not only steal and be as corrupt as possible, but they still funnel these funds to the people who put them in position. So it's like a large gathering or a family in the sense of everyone who's in on the corruption. And they're all like a chained link. They're all linked to each other in some way or some form. So even the people you think might not even have any relation to each other, behind the scenes are all like cozy and they know exactly what's going on. So for us who's on the outside, like we look into this and we ask ourselves, like some of these people who are appointed into these positions are people who are just like us, people who are just within general society. Was a teacher, was a banker, was a doctor, was a nurse. But for some reason, like they have like an underground network. Not some reason, like there's a reason obviously, but like in a way that we don't understand, there's this secret network of like corrupt people who just know how to bring in other people into their fold and who know how to get them to pledge allegiance, pledge loyalty, so that even when they're in positions of power, even when they're in these seats of government positions, they still have loyalty to people who have served their time and left. That they can even come back into like the political scene, be on news channel and then say with confidence, like, this is what's going to happen. He's going to do this. He can't say this. He can't do this. And for most of us, we're shocked. Like, why does he have the confidence or the audacity to come in and speak on an elected official after his time has been served, after he has done his tenure? Like, why does he still have so much sway in politics? But it's because of this godfatherism. It's because of these people who have come together behind the scenes, linked up, have pledged loyalty, it's like a cult in a sense, have pledged loyalty to each other, and then they perpetuate this system as they go, even up until their deathbeds, even up until the days that they die. They know for a fact that they have loyalists in power that will do everything that they say because they were the ones who put them there in the first place. And how they were able to get them to swear loyalty for such a long time, we don't know. All we do know is that they're very well connected and they know how to recruit people that are just everyday people. Someone that could be right across from you tomorrow or yesterday having a conversation about how bad this government is and how things are so upside down. Next minute, you could just wake up and see him in a government position, appointed, hired, and he's working. And everything that he had argued against or like preached against, he's doing it down to like a textbook definition. And he's defending this so confidently, almost as if to say, like, now that I'm in a position of power, like, I can do these things and say and defend it and know that you can't stop me, you can't come across me, because to do so would be to come across someone that's also in our league or in our like family of like corrupt officials, and no one's going to go against the family. No one's going to sacrifice his position or his life to like change the system or to make any claims or accusations against people that are in power. So by doing so, they keep it very well intact and locked in place that it's almost hard for people to even like question it. And then you have the people who never get into power, like they never like go into positions of governance and still like maintain their status as like civilians. And they use them for protests, they use them for elections, they use them as thugs to like intimidate people that they think will come against them or speaking too harshly or criticizing them too harshly on the internet or in their social like spaces. They do everything they can to stifle these voices, and they have an army of people that are so willing and so ready to like put themselves on the line. How they do this, we still don't know. We just see it happen every day. And that's what I mean when I say like it's so like deep into like the fabric of our society that even people that you see on the streets casually and you never like have a conversation with them could be one of these people paid to like cause a disruption. Like you can have an election at a certain place and you have certain election officials come in and they're there to like watch over like the polls and make sure everything is going smoothly. And then all of a sudden you have these group of men run in, steal the boxes, shoot up the place, intimidate people and run off. You know what I'm saying? The electoral bodies, they'll count this as like casualties, things that are bound to happen because these places are obviously like high risk areas. But the fact that they always have people that are teaming and ready to do these things is what makes it so bad for us, because there's no way we can look at anyone in our own society and say like, that's someone that could do something like this, or that's someone that, without a doubt, like if they wanted to approach him, he would definitely give up his morals just to join him. We can't tell.
Have you had an example of somebody that you thought was just a random civilian, and then later they ended up becoming working for the government or being paid by the government to do something?
Not personally though. I don't have anyone like immediately like family or friend that I've seen in that position. But there are people who like say they used to be like actors, for example. Like they were very good actors. They were acting in many great roles and people loved them. And then after like their acting career kind of like wanes off a little bit, they go into politics. They start off as like local governments. Because we have like, I know in America they have like counties, so like you can have a sheriff. So here we have like local government, like chairman. So these people go into like the local government, like they start off in like the House of Assembly. And everyone's so like confident, like, oh, like now that we have someone that we know for a fact used to be on our side, used to be just amongst us as an actor, used to be like come to shows, meet his fans, have meet and greets, like be out in public and be open. There's no way like he would go into politics and all of a sudden like he would change. But that's what happened. Like they'll go into politics and all of a sudden like their talking points, their views, everything just changes overnight. And it's such a black and white like comparison because like you never like showed any signs of these like changes happening. There was never a time where you came out and you told us like, okay, my views are changing because of so and so events or so and so person has spoken to me and he was able to convince me. Nah, like they just wake up and just switch, just flip. And there are other people like in other like states that have witnessed like certain people who like used to be like thugs or like street like people who were so big in the streets for like the street work that they did, whether it be like intimidation or like gangsterism, who for whatever reason like people had written off like, oh, there's no way like he could be like a serious politician, like he could be taken seriously, just to wake up and all of a sudden like he's in a position of power. Like people really now respect him. Like there are now public officials who associate with this person and want him to be like the face of whatever like campaign or rally that they're moving. And I know like these people like in a sense like they already had these bad attributes to them. So like it shouldn't surprise us as to why like they side with the government. But the government does a good job of like cleaning up their image and making themselves look so like competent, so clean, so official that when you see such a thing happen, it's like what's going on? Like how can you present such a clean image to the people who are already accusing you of corruption, and all of a sudden you pick someone that they already know, they've seen firsthand as like being this hooligan, this bad person that no one wants to associate with, and then now you try to clean him up in your image to say like he's a reformed, changed official now that could help you. Doesn't make any sense. So we have like experiences of regular people who change, celebrities who change, and then people that we know that are bad, that should never even be close to anything official as far as government is concerned, who they'll also pick. So we see on multiple levels as far as like just whoever they could choose to use.
Is you mentioned that like there's people that used to be like hooligans, like bad people, and then suddenly the government props them up and says they're clean. I know there's a lot of instability, particularly in the north, with militants and not just Boko Haram, but other like militant organizations. Is there any evidence that there's some government collaboration between the government and those organizations?
We don't have any strong evidence that like concrete proofs to say this is what's going on. These are the people in charge of this. There's been like all kinds of accusations, even amongst themselves. But the way we see it, like we see it as if they really, how do I put it? Like they know like we're really keen on what's going on. We're trying to understand just how these people are coming into like these weapons and so angry and running all throughout the south and the middle belt and causing all this violence. So they do a very good job of like playing around with like who's to blame. 1 minute someone can come in and be like, I spoke to these people, like the ex-militants, the ex-bandits, and they confided in me and told me like they had so and so person sponsor them. Another person can come up tomorrow and be like, oh no, like so that person who said that was lying. I also spoke to these militants and they said this is where they got their guns from and these are the people sponsoring them. And it would be two conflicting stories that just couldn't make any sense. You have to pick one to go along with for it to even make sense to you. And the reason they do that is because we know, like, for one, the people who are doing all of this definitely have to be sponsored because there's nothing to gain from just running through the South and like the Middle Belt and even the North, just killing people. Like, what's your aim? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're going to be a terrorist, there has to be some sort of like ideology or philosophy behind it. Like, we have Boko Haram, who were like an Islamic extremist group, and their thing was like they saw Western education as like a bad thing, haram, because it made them lose their wives and their way of life. And they had to go to extreme measures to like bring back their quote unquote normalcy to like their societies. I'm not like justifying them existing, but I'm saying like that's just that kind of makes sense in a way because you know like, all right, these people are just drunk off of like an extremist ideology that was fed to them by maybe people they met outside of Africa or even African Muslims themselves who developed these extremist ideologies from their reaction to like Westernization. But the new wave of like bandits and like militants that we have now are not affiliated with any religion, don't have any ties to any ethnic group per se. Even though we know like they're Fulani people, they don't do any of these things just because they're Fulani. Like that's not like they don't brag about it. Like in a sense, you know how like militants like they'll make videos and they'll claim killings and like bombings and say like we did this and we are the ones in charge and this is why we're doing it. They don't make those kind of videos.
Yeah.
They don't say those things. They just do what they do and they go and they're all in the bushes, all in the forest, just hiding, just waiting to attack people in their farms and kill them. There's a case where like there's an American missionary in Nigeria right now who had to go to one of our news channels and like make a case for this Christian farmer who had killed one of them, came into his farm to fight him. He had a gun on him, like an AK-47. I'll get into that too. But he had a gun on him, and I think he wanted to shoot him, but he was too sloppy in his attack. He overpowered this militant, killed him, and then the Nigerian government decided to hold the Christian farmer responsible for the death and send him to the death penalty because he killed this Fulani militant. Now, for us Nigerians, when we look at this case, the only thing we can like say or even ask, if we have to ask, is why? Like, why would you hold him responsible for self-defense? Like, this is self-defense everywhere else in the world. Like, clearly he was in the right to have fought for himself. But the fact that they would rather hold him accountable for such a grievous attack on his farm and on his person just shows us like there has to be a level of cooperation with government in this, because you don't need a lawyer, you don't need a judge to just look at this case and like deliberate or like find out why he did what he did. Like it's clear as day. Like this is a man on his farm farming. Someone intruded his space that's supposed to be private property. Tried to kill him with the gun he was brandishing, and he fought back and he killed this person. Like obviously, like he's in the right, but they still went against him, decided to put him on death row and were awaiting his trial. That and like just many other cases where they go into farms, kill people, run off, and then we call on the Nigerian government, we call on the police, we call on the armies, and we're like, what are you doing to stop this madness? Like what measures are you taking to push them back, to show them like there's a real resistance to whatever it is that they're trying to do? And how are you even engaging the people who are even carrying this like acts out? Now, the ones that they actually caught though, because there's some of them that they caught for, how they caught them, we don't know. We just know like some people turned up and they said like they were caught by the Nigerian army. We never saw any news story of it. We never heard of any fightings or any clashes that made them catch them. We just know like at some point they either surrendered or like they showed up as people who had been caught by the police. The next thing, they grant them amnesty. They give them money, clothes, food stuff, and then claim that they are now repentant. These are people who had already like gone to villages, killing people, slaughtering, raping, burning down homes. They did everything unimaginable to these people. And then they show up one day and you say like, oh, you forgive them. How can you forgive them on behalf of the people who they have wronged without even including them in this conversation? How can you bring them to such a reconciliation event and the people that they victimize are not even present, and then you grant them repentance, and then just to catch, after they give them this repentance status, they recruit them into the army, they make them soldiers, put them into the army and make them Nigerian soldiers, and then they call it a day, like case is done, everything is good now, like these people are now back in society as regular people. For us, when we look at all these cases, we say to ourselves, like there's no way, without the doubt, that the government is working on these people, because you're supposed to defend the citizens against anything that will harm them. Why would you side with their killers against them? And not only just side with them, but like grant them repentancy status, grant them like life back into society, and then give them positions in the military, rearming these people who had killed us again. Like that doesn't make any sense. Like at the very least, even if you wanted to forgive them, say like they expressed all kinds of remorse and it was an effort that the government felt that they had to make to like bring peace on both sides. You're not supposed to put them in these like special positions. These are military positions supposed to be reserved for people that are not only vetted for like their skill, but more so like their mentality, like the way they think. When you put them back into these military situations, you're only retraining them. In fact, you're sharpening their skills, because at any point that they go renegade against the Nigerian military, they not only know how to combat them, having been inside of the camps themselves, but they now have like better skills that they never had before. Like they're sharper with their guns. They know how to move through bushes. They know how to fight guerrilla warfare. They know all like the police stations and points and all the soldiers' tactics. Like they know everything about us because you put them into our military folds after they killed us. So it's obvious on that kind of level that there has to be a government like hand in all this that's going on. But we can't pinpoint anyone in particular and say like he's definitely involved or like he was the one who oversaw this like operation. We just don't know who exactly is doing it, but we do know that the level of cordiality that they have with these people who are still killing us, by the way, but the ones that repent and go into the army, others still follow suit. It's almost like what they have with the ISIS or like the Al Qaeda, where like they have schools of people that they train, and then when one set or one faction of them gets killed or brutally like decimated, they know like there's another like school or set of people who are coming up to fill up these ranks. It's the same playbook. So they have like different levels of people just coming up and coming up and coming up after these other bandits has already killed and been absorbed into society as soldiers. So the way we see it is almost like a pipeline of like militants, bandits, terrorists to soldiers, just straight. And they go to killing us in a way to like prove their skills or something. And then these military heads look at them and say, well, now you can be a part of us. Because they have all kinds of soldier like barracks and recruitments in Nigeria. Like there's so many people that you could go to and recruit if you wanted to increase the numbers of like the soldiers. Why are you constantly reabsorbing these militants and these terrorists into our ranks as soldiers if you are not like working with them outside of like the public view? That's the only way we see it. Then for the AK-47s that they have, which is another like proof that we have that the government has to have a hand in this. Most of these people who carry out these killings are very poor. Like they're the poorest of the poor. These guns that they have are military grade weapons. In fact, Nigeria has to buy weapons, and you can only buy these weapons through top officials that are authorized to make these purchases. So the fact that these guns are getting into their hands, someone has to be buying them and giving it to them. This is not money that they can pool together as a people and buy. And then bullets? No. Someone's definitely funding their ammunition as far as we're concerned, because the kind of guns that they have on par with the guns that our military has, and these people carry it around and walk so freely, like casually. And you mean to tell me that someone who has to walk the cows for a living, who has to live a nomadic lifestyle of going through like cities and villages with cows every day just to feed himself, has the money to buy military grade weapons and bullets at ease? No. That's wrong. Even if it was being funded by people outside of Africa, say like it was like Muslim extremists in the Middle East or Muslim extremists, even in Africa itself, like there still be a trail of how these guns are getting to them in Nigeria, because we have border control. We have people at the borders who are very much active as far as like the people they let in and people that go out. So they know like if there's a truck coming in, it has to be searched. If there's a car that's just driving back and forth, like it's suspicious activity. Like there has to be a protocol as far as like how we address like militancy and terrorist movements in and out of our borders. So we'll be able to track it and say like, okay, this is where the militants are getting their guns from. When Boko Haram had first started like their thing in Nigeria, they used to use like homemade weapons. They'd take like gas cylinders filled with gas, and then they'll like connect some sort of like explosive to it and have someone who was a suicide bomber go into the market with this gas, light the matches or like the lighter, put it to the gas and to blow up. Those are very crude devices they use. So we saw like their rise in like the sophistication of their weapons. So we were able to understand like, all right, they're getting their weapons through the homemade weapons that they make and the ones that they steal from like the Nigerian officials or soldiers that they fought with. So when they fight them, they'll take their guns, they'll take their tanks. That made sense to us, because now we can see like firsthand like how they're being like armed. These guys just show up. How can someone who walks 20, 30 cows every day have a AK-47? That's impossible. And have bullets, not just bullets, but like enough bullets to spare. Someone has to be putting these guns in their hands. Someone has to. And every time they seize their guns, there's never like a show of like destruction or like, okay, now we're like destroying the guns or like this is what we're doing with all the seized weapons that we have. We just never hear of what happens to the guns again. And in Nigeria, there's a law that's passed for like if you're a police officer and you have a gun and you say you get into like a shootout with like a thief or like a terrorist and they take your gun from you as a police officer who has lost his gun in like the field of battle, you're going to be penalized for losing your weapon because they're going to see as you aiding the terrorist or the thief or the criminal because you're not supposed to lose your weapon at any means. In fact, it's better off that you run away with your gun in your hand than you die and they take your gun from you because that's the way the Nigerian police sees it. And if that was the way they were getting their guns and their arms, we would have known because there would be so many police officers who would have been kicked out of their offices, out of their positions because they lost their guns in battle with these people. But we don't see that happen. We don't see police officers being warned off. We don't see police officers being called out or criticized for losing so many guns in conflict with these people. So we know like someone is actually giving it to them hand in hand, giving them not just the guns but the bullets hand in hand and allowing them to roam free. Because they know like at the end of the day, when they do get caught, all they have to do is say like we confess, we're the ones who did it, we're wrong, we're sorry. And they're going to reabsorb them back into society and then take them straight to the soldiers' barracks, straight to the military camps, places and people that they've already fought before. Imagine like you fight someone as a soldier who's a terrorist and all of a sudden like you see him now as a fellow soldier, someone that's now sitting side by side with you, fighting alongside you, and you're not supposed to feel suspicious, you're not supposed to feel threatened. Like, this is someone who was aiming to kill us months ago, fighting for like his beliefs or whatever it is that he claimed to have been right at the time. How would you bring them into the same fold as us who have been fighting with them for years and years? And how are we supposed to feel? Like, what kind of message are you trying to pass to not only us, but to the people who are defending? And that's just how we know, like, for a fact that the government has to be on work because there's just too many inconsistencies in their policies and the things that go on for us to just like pretend like there's not any form of like cooperation between them.
Why can't this be resolved through democratic elections, democratic means? Why does there need to be a revolution in order to fix this corruption crisis in Nigeria?
Because everything is so muddied and so scrambled that even if we wanted to take a stand as Nigerians and say, all right, like we as the Nigerian people, we see what's going on. We see everything that's happened in the last 60 something years. We want to unanimously stand and say like we want a change in our political system. They know that they have people who are teaming and ready to not only play opposition to a unanimous and united Nigerians, but are also willing to testify on any platform that you'll be giving that these people who are coming out to say like what you're doing is wrong and we want change are like political actors. Like that's the term that they use. Like if you come out and you say like, oh, like I think this president and this regime is corrupt and everything about him is corrupt, and I think the Nigerian people should join me and call this man or his government out. They're going to have people who are going to come up and say that person is a political actor, he's in opposition, he just wants power for himself. And what should have been like a united front against the government would now like easily turn into like opposition versus like ruling party or like opposition versus opposition, like two parties outside of the government can fight themselves, or another party that's in government and the one that's outside of government will fight themselves. Because the way Nigeria works is like this. If your political party gets into, say, the presidency or like Senate House or any major like seat as a governor, as a Senate president, or as the president himself, you're seen as being like the dominant party at the time. So like to them within their folds of like multiple parties, like this is now the ruling party. That's the term they use. Like this is the ruling party. This is the party that's now ruling us. So if you wanted to address the situation as a purely Nigerian situation, they would easily turn it into, oh, that's an opposition party that wants to come at us because they're out of position, they're out of power, and this is their best bet at coming back at power is to criticize us and make it seem like we're not working. But because if they made that statement themselves, it would be obvious to people watching, like, you just might be deflecting, you just might be using this to deflect from your own incompetence, your own corruption, your own shortcomings. So they have people that you can pay to come out and say, oh, well, I'm a neutral in this stance. And I think he's only making this assertion because he wants power, or he wants to come at the ruling party because they're out of power and they don't have the power to like do whatever it is that they want to do. And then what would have been a simple case of like the Nigerians coming together against the government and the government system would now be different parties coming against themselves, or he's against me because of this, or he's against them because of that. And then everything would just die out, just naturally just fizzle out into nothing. All because they easily politicize issues that are national into like petty squabbles between this leader and that leader. Here's another thing too about Nigerian politics is like, we don't really have parties that are like ideology based. Like this isn't like America or Europe where there's like a left and a right. So your left has like leftist ideologies and leftist principles that they go by, and the right has ideologies. It's more so just like power factions. Very powerful men come together and they recruit other very powerful men, and they say to themselves, let's form a party that we know can go to the polls and contest with the ruling party of the day and see how best we do against them. If we win, we become the new ruling party, and then we can now share it amongst ourselves. But just to show you how deep the corruption goes, so they have these parties that like people leave their parties and go to different parties just for whoever has the power of the day. In America, it's unheard of. Like you never hear of like a Democrat saying like, "Oh, now I want to be Republican." Everyone's going to look at him funny, like, "What do you mean you're Republican now?" Like, you have leftist views. You view like social issues in a certain way. Like we know like this is how you think. So why would you just all of a sudden up and become a Republican? Unless you have such a convicting story to tell, like, oh, like I woke up and I thought about it differently and I saw that there has to be like a compelling story that you can tell people as to why you changed. Whereas in Nigeria, like these parties don't really represent anything of any meaning. They're just more so just like power clubs that anybody can belong to. So someone who used to be in my party, like say 5 years ago, 10 years ago, can be in the opposition party tomorrow for no reason. And people just have to accept it. You just switched. And he can enjoy government and power by simply moving between different like parties that are ruling at the time. So for Nigerians, we know like all of them in their separate parties are very much united behind the scenes. Like it's not something we can prove because we don't have like anything convicting to say like, okay, this is when it happened. This is how they came together. But you see play out because 1 minute you're in this party, this is people you roll with, this is the party that you took to the polls. But as soon as you win, you get into power and then you think your position could be threatened in the next election cycle. You just switch over to a new party and become a member of the opposition that you campaigned against, you talked against, you spoke against, you convinced people to not vote for. Now you're now a part of them. And when they ask them like, why would you make such a change? Why would you switch all of a sudden? They say, well, that's just politics. It's a game. Now, since to the Nigerian political elite, it's more of a game. Like, who wouldn't want to be in the ruling party? Who wouldn't want to be in the party that has the position of power or looks more promising on the next election cycle? So, whenever we try to have such a united front, we do know for a fact that there are people who are willing and ready to muddy up every conversation, every talking point, everything we bring to light. Like they have points to counter our points. Like they have people to speak up against us and to reduce the conversation from such a critical conversation to our state of living, our finances, our resources, our livelihood. It could come down to petty issues. It's more so like tribe. Oh, well, he's making that comment just because the person in power now is my tribe and he hates our tribe, that kind of thing. The president that we have now, he runs a very tribal government. But the thing is, he worked with the last president to bring him in. So there was some sort of like understanding or agreement amongst them that by joining forces, he would help the last president come into power, sit in position of power for his full tenure, which is 8 years. Once he leaves power, this guy who's president right now stepped into position by winning his primaries, obviously, and then winning at the polls. So to Nigerians, when we look at it, it's like you have two presidents of two different tribes who are of the same party, both corrupt, both working together. But now, if we criticize this president as right now, with this position of power right now, and say like, you have surrounded yourselves with your tribesmen, everyone in power is like a member of your tribe. Why would you have a majority of your cabinet or majority of your political like affiliations while you're in power be all your tribes people? That's a very bad look for a very multi-ethnic country like Nigeria, over 250 tribes. To them, they say, oh, well, like, competence is competence. Like, if he's good at the job, he's good at the job. It doesn't matter what tribe he is. But what kind of coincidence would it be for everyone in your caucus, in your circle to be of your tribe if you were just picking out the competent people? It doesn't make any sense. So they know how to play into all these like smaller divisions and smaller like issues to like blow against the bigger issues that we're discussing. So to him now, it's like you can't.
It's like divide and conquer.
Yeah, exactly. So now you can't criticize me because, oh, this is why you're doing it. You're doing it because you're a different tribe. Now it's no longer about the national issues. It's now about the tribal differences that we have. And a conversation that was more so about competence and like the way you're handling the resources, the way you're handling management, the people you put into these positions will now be devolved into a conversation about like how many people of a certain tribe can be in position of power. How do you pick out like a multi-ethnic cabinet? Like, would you go into every tribe and ask them, give me a member of your tribe so I can have a fully like diverse tribe? Like, it doesn't make any sense. I know like every other like multi-ethnic like country has these issues around like diversity and representation, but to Nigeria, we really don't care as long as you perform those. So we never bring up these issues if the people in power are doing your job. And we say this all the time, like, it doesn't matter if like you're a certain tribe, as long as you go into this public office and serve the public as best as the public has trusted you to do so. It doesn't matter what tribe you are. But when the government of the day is so corrupt and then everyone around you is of a certain tribe, it doesn't help. It just doesn't make any sense that it would look this way to us, that not only are you corrupt, but you have all your tribesmen with you in on this. So now, like, it's obvious that they, without a doubt, like without any doubt, that they're going to give you their unchecked loyalty because they know, like, at the very least, this is my tribesman. And in the cases where they are using members of their tribe predominantly, they still have people who are very much loyal to them as far as like politically, like say someone who you helped by appointing him as your special advisor or as a commissioner or as a minister. Now that it's time for him to go for the position of the Senate, or the Senate House, or like the House of Assembly, you're going to use your influence to make sure that he wins. He's in position now, he's in power now, but to us, it rubs us the wrong way. Like, this is supposed to be a merit-based position. Why are you giving out favors? Why does your political cabinet look like everyone you've helped? Basically, like, why does it look like you're around you and all your buddies, you and all your friends? And because there's such a history of this happening, we keep track of everyone who's been in power and everyone who's left and everyone who's coming in, that we see this long chain of people who are just coming into power, following the path of people before them, who I mentioned before, like their godfathers, like their political, like, seniors in a sense, like political, like overlords who know that using my position to help you, you owe me, and the next person you bring in line owes you, and the next, like a Ponzi scheme, in a sense, almost like a Ponzi scheme, how like someone can bring you into this business and then you have to recruit other people to make money, that kind of thing. So they run it the same way. Like, if it's not me and my tribe's people, then it's more so me and everyone else who I've helped, who undoubtedly has loyalty to me because they know I helped them. And if they ever like go against me, I have more political history, more political connections to like make their tenure such a living hell that they have no other choice to be loyal to me. There's a case that just happened recently right now. In one of the states in Nigeria, there was a governor who had just passed, like who just finished his tenure and left. And he helped another like candidate become the governor. And people saw like, oh, like this is someone that he passed the baton to, this is someone that he helped into a position of power. This new governor now wanted to change things around himself. essentially he wanted to become the new godfather of the state. He wanted to become the new political like big man of the state. And this ex-governor who had helped him became very, very, very hostile towards him. He was like, no, no, like you forget that I have people in the House of Assembly in that state. You forget that I have people who are like still in position, because some of these positions that are political are not always elected. So even though like a certain elected official could leave after his tenure, he could still have people that are still appointed in certain positions that are still loyal to him because he was the one who put them in that position in the first place. So he used all of these appointed positions to show him like, oh, like if you think you can break like our agreement, or you could go against what was discussed or what was agreed between us now that you're in power, the joke's on you, because I still have the people that are in appointed positions that are willing to go against you every chance that you can, just to show you like I still have that much political pull in that state. And it escalated up until a point where like they started like threatening like, oh, there are oil wells in this state. We'll blow up this oil well. We'll blow up that oil well, and we'll cause as much havoc as possible, just to show you like we also have our own like political power as well. And then because this guy who's the ex-governor is also in cahoots with like the president, he used the president to call a state of emergency in that state. So now he's using his like political influence with the president to call a state of emergency in the state of a governor that he just appointed, or he just helped get into position, to show him like, I have a lot of political pull to frustrate you if you think you can go against our agreement. This said governor now had to sit out of position. He had to go on suspension for 6 months, while this man kept doing rounds of like news interviews, basically just like calling him ungrateful, calling him like arrogant, calling him misguided, talking about how certain people around him also wanted that position too. Like they wanted to be governors as well, and he overlooked them to appoint him into being the governor. So why would he get into that position as governor, knowing that he helped him, and then want to go against him? And then certain rumors started flying around. Like people were saying like this ex-governor had made a request from him to give him like a certain amount of money every month, like basically to put him on payroll from the governorship like accounts, like the state account, to put this ex-governor on payroll after he has left office, not as pension, but more so as like a favor that I did for you. Now you would pay it back. And this new governor was like, no, like I won't do it. Like I won't pay you from our state treasury just because you helped me. And then he said, well, then I guess you're just going to have to like fight me. You're going to have to fight me politically within this political like field, because I put you in power. You have to respect the chain of command, even though it's not official. And there are people on like social media who defend these kind of politicians, obviously paid. We know they're obviously paid because they're going against like logic and natural reason to do things like this. So they're saying like, oh, like that's just how the game goes. That's how the political game in Nigeria works. Like, you know, like if someone puts you, helps you get into a certain seat that everybody else would die for, you have to be loyal. You have to repay that favor back in any way possible. They ask you for a certain amount of money, pay up. If they ask you to be put on payroll, pay them. If they ask you for favors or to have access to certain things that you shouldn't have access to, give it up, because you know that they helped you in that position. And they'll defend these men almost as if like these are your family members. Like, but they're not though. Like, they don't know these people from Adam, or they don't know them from nowhere. They're just people that we as Nigerians know for a fact are paid to defend the incompetency so far from like what we expect of them. Like the conversation now is no longer about like his policies or like his tenure as a governor, the things that he's bringing into effect. How is he changing the state? How is he improving the state for the people? The conversation is shifted entirely to his loyalties to like former governors, or like where he stands as far as like this political battle that's happening. Who are the people that he has as his allies that are going to help him fight against the ex-governor and the president, who's willing to act unconstitutionally too, to help him to defend this state against this person that he put into power. So if we ever come together as a people and say, all right, enough is enough, we know like they have people that they can pull out from our group, either paid, however they do, we still don't know, but we always just assume that they pay them because that's the only reason that we could think of that makes sense. But we know they can pull them out from our group and say, go against the larger like group of Nigerians. We had a protest in 2020 against like the government, but this was in Lagos State. And the army pulled up. They came in and they were, according to what they told us at like their testimony, they were supposed to shoot like warning rounds in the crowd to dispel the crowd and send people home because they didn't want the protest to turn violent for whatever reason, which makes sense because at certain protests, certain people get carried away by certain emotions and then they do things that are destructive. But at a point, they turned the guns on people and they started shooting into the crowd, killing people. The day after, like they came over to inspect like the places where they had protested, and they found dead bodies, they found bullet shells, people were dead. People came out to say, okay, why did you bring the army out to come and do this? Why did you tell them to shoot for us? Who gave them the command within the ranks of the army to shoot at civilians? Till today, no one owned up to say that we were the ones who gave that command, that we were the ones in charge of it. But the army doesn't act on their own. They're not autonomous. Like there's no army in the world that doesn't have or take orders from a higher authority that's in power, that's in government. So someone has to have called them on the phone and said, go out there and shoot at these people. Because that's the decision that they made by themselves. If not, the soldiers would have said, like, maybe as the protests were going on, we got carried away or we felt threatened by the protesters. We had to shoot at people. No one said anything about that. They just said, we came out as we were ordered to do so, and what happened was what happened. That's it. That's what happened. So that's how they use like some of us to fight us, just to like break all our movements against them. So we know like even if we wanted to come out in mass and protest, even if we wanted to boycott elections, even if we wanted to do anything as a larger block of Nigerians, there's always people that they can use to stifle this movement or to even make the movement look legitimate for whatever reason. And that's just how it works in Nigeria.
I know that you said that you're Igbo tribe, and that the three largest tribes in Nigeria are the Hausa, Yoruba, and Igbo.
Yes.
But it's been a really long time, I think over 50 years since there was an Igbo president in Nigeria. Do you feel like the Igbos are underrepresented in Nigeria's government?
Yes, but there's a reason behind it though. Multiple reasons actually. First off, when we fought the war was mostly fought by the Igbos against Nigeria because we were the ones who seceded following the revolutionary coup. The coup was supposed to be a revolutionary coup to change the ruling elites and to replace them with a new set of elites that we would trust to handle our interests. The thing about the coup is that the people who led the coup were predominantly Igbo, and a lot of the people who were killed were not Igbo. The people who were in power that were Igbo at the time were either uninformed or for whatever reason just not present at the time when they went around killing all these people. So it looked as if we really went out as a tribe to seize power against the other like bigger tribes. That was not the case though. Following that coup, there was like backlashes against the Igbo in the north, like the Hausa, the Fulani in the north. Like they had like their programs, as they call it, where they came out on the streets and like started targeting like Igbo people, killing them, chasing them out of their shops, their businesses, just harassing them and killing them. The Eastern region governor at the time was Igbo, and he ruled over the eastern part, which was more so Igbo predominant, but had other like smaller tribes as well. He made the decision to call his people back who were Igbo in the north to say, come back to the east where I am. I see what's going on and it's unfair. When he came back, he then proceeded to secede and make a case for secession, called the head of state at the time. They went to Ghana, they made an agreement called the Aburi Accord, and on this agreement, they had both agreed to the secession. He came back into Nigeria, and for whatever reason, he felt like he was deceived, he was used at the agreement, and that he should have never signed that agreement. The thing is, instead of calling for negotiations again, or calling for another meeting where like we can come in and maybe look over this agreement that we had and see if we can make any adjustments to what we had agreed on, he decided to make a declaration of war. He camped outside of the east, shot the first bullet or the first rounds of ammunition into like the eastern region, and that sparked off the war. The war lasted 3 years, and the Igbo saw it as a genocidal war because starvation was used as a war tactic. They had an embargo on us on food and aid, and we couldn't get food for 3 years. So people were starved to death. A lot of people were like sick, big heads, scurvy, all kinds of illnesses just from like malnutrition. After the war, we were reconciled back into Nigeria. So there's still that sentiment of like, these are the people who fought against the larger like Nigerian group. How could we trust them with power? Because we know if they come into power, they might try to break this country up again, or they might take or hear out like other like secessionist groups who they might sympathize or empathize with for like being in that position before, who might want to separate, and that's not what they want. And being that he took the eastern region at the time with him, as some of those places are the places that had oil, people saw this as a very like underhanded move by him. Like, oh, why would you take the oil predominant areas along with you in this your new nation if you didn't already plan this ahead of time, and saw this move as one to where you can have prosperity for yourself outside of Nigeria. So now a lot of Nigerians feel like the Igbo is not people you should trust with like power, because they easily act on we easily act on our own interests, and we're easily moved by like other group interests, because we feel like, yeah, as a group, like you should have your own say for yourselves, and they might be the ones to help break up Nigeria if they ever come into power. That's one. Two, before the British left Nigeria, before the British people left, they had like a thorough assessment of Nigeria. As much as I'm like very anti-colonization, I still have to give them their credit. They were very, very, very meticulous in their study of Nigerians and the Nigerian tribes and the dynamics between all of the Nigerian ethnic groups. So they actually understand us on a very fundamental level than most nations outside of Africa. They had an assessment of the different tribes by like their behaviors and what they were prone to. And then there's this report that they released where they said like this tribe is this and that tribe is that, and then this tribe is this. Basically just like a summary of what they think of like the different tribes. That assessment alongside like their policies at the time when they were still in power in Nigeria as colonial like officers helped shape like the post-independent view on the different tribes. So people in the north now see the Igbos more so as domineering or aggressive in their tactics or approach to business and life in general, because the British said like we're very rebellious people and we're people who don't have any respect for central leadership. So a lot of people now take on those same tropes of us, and they see us like, oh, because of what the British said of us, who are very meticulous people, we have to trust their assessment of the Igbos when they say that they're very rebellious people. We have to trust their assessment when they say like they're very domineering and aggressive people. And to a certain degree we are, but it's not because we want to dominate everybody else. It's more so because coming outside of colonization, we felt like it should be the Black people in a Black majority nation and the Black nation to be in these positions of power, to be in these government positions, in these public administrative positions, leading other Black people. It shouldn't be a white man coming here to dictate for us what we should do or shouldn't do. Like we should lead ourselves. We have the right to like self-govern ourselves. So we should be the ones to do that. Except we were the only tribe that were very eager to like replace the colonial officers when they left. It wasn't a thing more so like us being like racist against whites and not seeing them a certain way. It was more so like no one should come into your house and tell you what to do. So we wanted to fill up the positions as quick as possible to say, we're just as competent as you are in these affairs if it came down to it too. So for other tribes, looking at us being so eager to like fill up these colonial offices and positions after they had left, made it look like we wanted to dominate them. We wanted to be the leading tribe. We wanted to be the most prominent tribe. We wanted everyone to see Nigeria as an Igbo like affair kind of thing. And it just wasn't the case. But because they had believed this to be our reality, they started to engage with us in that manner up until when the coup had happened, because they had always felt that way. In fact, the guy who led the coup was raised in the north. He was raised in the north by an Hausa man. So he already spoke Hausa. He was already very much assimilated into their society, and he knew so much about them that when he had carried out the coup and killed so many Hausa men that were in power, they saw this as like utter betrayal, like a deep level of betrayal. Like, why would you, as someone who was raised amongst us, who lived amongst us, kill us like this for something you deem a revolution? Like, and the way he did it too, like coming in at night with his crew of like soldiers, killing them, showing no mercy. They felt like it was very much a tribal thing, because this is someone that we had taken into our ranks as our own and raised as our own. He spoke outside, he lived with us. His godfather was an Hausa man. So like, why would you do this if it wasn't you just being more loyal to your Igbo brothers, as opposed to like a revolution that you claim that you're doing? That's another thing. The last reason is because before we were colonized, like we were very much tradespeople. Like we traded so much. We had booming markets of farmers, because that was just how we structured our societies. Like we had subsistence farming, where we go to the farm, set up like small hubs of markets where we traded all our excesses, the excess yams, excess meats, excess beans, whatever it is that we had in excess, we would take to our farms and we trade. So by nature, we were already so accustomed to trading, it was easy for us to pick up trading when the colonial officers had left. We filled up almost every market at the time that it looked like we were exploiting different like areas instead of like trading with them. We came over to their cities, we came over to their states, their lands, into their markets, and dominated their markets, became the leading traders in their markets. And they felt like, well, if you're making all this money here, you don't marry our women, you don't build houses here, you don't like, you're not planning to live amongst us as one of us. You're taking all this wealth and going back to the east or your homelands with this wealth. We feel exploited because you're dominating our markets. You run your own markets, and then you come to run our own markets as well. It's unfair. They felt like it was just so unfair. So that too also like built the anti-Igbo sentiment at the time. So after everything had been done, as far as the war was done, like all of this just compounded up until like the Igbos can't be trusted in power. They just can't be trusted. They're just too conniving, too scheming, and too aggressive in their approach to trade and life, that if we ever give them such a chance again, they might just overrun us. They might do something that will be so hard for us to undo, whether it be splitting the country up or opening up new trades that they dominate and everyone else will just have to play catch up to. So there's so much of that anti-Igbo sentiment coming from all of these reasons I've listed. And I think that's just why for so many people, like it's just a no-go area. But I will say this though, of all the tribes in Nigeria, I believe, not just because I'm Igbo, but because we have a culture of truth-telling. Like it's so embedded in our psyche and in our spiritual belief that it's very important that you tell the truth, even if it hurts, like even if it's painful to hear and live through. It's better we know it to be true as a thing than to just build up this whole wall or building of lies and think it's true, only for it to collapse later on in life or down the line in our activities or whatever it is that we're doing. So to us, when it comes down to Nigerian sentiment, we know for a fact we're very much behind. We're very much have been set back by all this corruption. So all the people that we push forward as candidates that we would like to see lead Nigeria, we don't push them because they're our tribesmen. We don't push them because we just want like an Igbo man to go there so it can be said that an Igbo man is in power or an Igbo man is president. We actually want to put someone that we know for a fact will get into that position and do something profound for all of us in general as a people and change the narrative and the story of what like Black nations look like or what it would be for a Black nation to govern themselves. But for all these other people having come out of that period of like the coup and all these anti-Igbo and tribal sentiments, they just can't see us in that way. Like they can't believe that we're really doing this because we want change. In their mind, it's like, oh, they're just being conniving again, or they're just being trickish again. They just want to play on the dysfunction in Nigeria to just assume power and then dominate everybody. So it's better off that we always box them out for whatever reason that they claim, even if they say they're the best, even if we're the most competent, even if we're the most educated, even if we're the most ready just to be in position of power. They just have a high level of distrust to allowing us into that position for that reason alone. And when they approach politics from their standpoints, they're almost always prone to tribal ethnic politics because in their minds, like, that's what everybody else is doing. Why wouldn't you want to be an ethnic loyalist if everyone else is doing the same thing? But the truth is, when it comes to the power sharing in Nigeria, as much as they love to make it seem like it's this ethnic game of like different tribes taking turns to like rule the country, it's really just a corpus of people who have known themselves since the military era and have trained their people to follow up in their footsteps up until the civilian democratic era. So yes, it might look like an ethnic game, but only because that's the way they want us to see it. Like when they come out to present themselves, they come out making ethnic claims and showing all kinds of loyalty. Like if it's a Yoruba president, he'll speak Yoruba in his campaigns. He'll go into Yoruba states and tell them like, you should want to vote for me, like I'm one of your own. But when it comes down to how like they share power amongst themselves, they have a network that crosses ethnic lines that they just know and trust will keep everything within themselves as a political elite as far as like doing what they want to do. So say like they have a policy that they want to enact and they know like this policy, if we go to IMF and take a loan from the IMF, they're going to give us $1 trillion to do this. Obviously, we don't want to like carry out this project. We don't plan to implement this project, but we want the IMF to think that we're going to do this. So we go as a united front. We have all these different ethnicities in this group that we take to the IMF. So they look at us and they think to themselves like, oh, because you've come as a diverse group, there's no way any foul play could be involved because now we know these other ethnicities that are here are going to put all of you in check as far as like where the money goes. Like, but that's not how it happens. As soon as they come to Nigeria, they put off all their ethnic divisions and come together as an elite, as a caucus of people who just happen to have power, and they share all of these loans and grants and aid amongst themselves. And that's it. That's the end of it. So when IMF comes knocking 4 years down the line, 8 years down the line, it's a whole new president and it's a new administration, and you're saying, well, how did you spend this money that we loaned you 10 years ago? How did you spend this money that we loaned you 8 years ago? Show us an account of like things you did. They'll say, oh, well, that's the old government. We took over from this new government. We have no ties to them. We don't know. And I'm of an entirely different ethnicity too, so I can't tell you for a fact what happened. You have to ask his people, and the people there, they know him better than I do. You know, they know how to muddy up everything ethnic-wise. Only thing that they have as a group that they've agreed amongst themselves is we just can't let the Igbos be in any prominent position of power because they're almost always the ones who want to see things work normally, who want to see things work in a systematic way that is easily comprehensible to everyone in Nigeria and outside Nigeria. And to them, it's like the reason why we want things to work this way is because we see something that they don't. Like, oh, they want a working system in Nigeria because there's just something that they know that we don't know about, like trade or something, or industries or running companies that we just don't know. And if we give them this chance, they'll easily run us over. So as much as we're ethnically diverse, we have to keep the Igbos off. We have to play ethnic politics to our own people to make them give us their votes without reason, without thinking like long term, like how does this serve me? How does this serve my family? How does this serve my children the next 10 years? Because my children who are kids now are going to grow up into adults in 10 years' time. How does this serve them? They don't think long term because they know how to play the game. Because in Nigeria, it's such a game. Like, they know how to play the game so well to them. They're like, oh, when we come together, we come as an ethnic diversity. But when we go out to campaign, everyone go to your like respective group states and lands, and then you know how to speak to your people, right? Well, I'm going to speak to my people too. When I get here, I'll speak in my language. I'll use a certain adage or proverb. I'll like appeal to their sentiment of brotherhood and like share this ethnic pride with them. And then I know for a fact that I've won my people over. You go win your people over, I'll win my people over. And then we come together and then we take power and share it amongst ourselves as a caucus. And then every cycle, the people are so confused. It's like, I mean, we voted our own person, we voted a Yoruba man, we voted an Hausa man. Why is it that we never see this progress in our lands? Like, the Hausa and the Yoruba have shared combined over 30 years of rule since the military era, yet their lands are still the most backwards. In fact, if you had to go by a visual assessment of the most prosperous regions in Nigeria, undoubtedly you say like the best places to live as far as regions. I'm not talking about cities, because some cities are very good, but if you go by like ethnic regions, like regions owned by the Hausas predominantly, regions owned by the Igbos, regions owned by the Yorubas, you see that the Hausa and the Yorubas, in as much as they've had power for the longest time in Nigeria, they still have some of the most backward, unregulated, just dysfunctional places in Nigeria. The North has Muslim Islamic extremism to an unbelievable level. Like, there's so much that's just not being reported because it's just too embarrassing to report. I remember in 2014 when they took those girls from the school and it was such a big thing everywhere, like bring back our girls. Obama and his wife had like a placard that they took a picture of the girls who went missing. There's so many stories like that of people going missing en masse. That's the North. And then in Yoruba and the Southwest, they enjoy like the Lagos economic access because there's a port to Lagos that a lot of people do business through, since that's the only functioning port in Nigeria, and people move their goods through. So there's a lot of like prosperity in Lagos. But once you go to other like Yoruba states, like it's very, very backwards, like poor facilities, just eyesores of places. There are places like that too in the East, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying like we're perfect, like we're the best. We have those places, but for a region who had gone through war, and most of that war was fought on our land, and also have been neglected in political appointments, in political offices, we see more progress. I'm going by visuals now because it's very easy for them to like make up fake stats or like make up fake claims and back it up with some government official saying, well, this is the truth. But when you travel and you go into all these places, just looking at the cities, you can tell like these people here, the people that live here are definitely more concerned about their livelihood and increasing the standards of living for themselves than the people who are here. But how does it make sense that the people who live in these backward areas have enjoyed the most political appointments and the most political power and then to show for it? Well, it's because amongst themselves, after they've been able to win off votes from their own people, they share these resources, aid, grants, money, even natural resources like oil wells, mines. They know how to share these things amongst themselves that is not tribal in any way. You see people who own oil wells that don't even live in these places where these oil wells are. They don't have any ties, they don't have any family, they don't have any claim to these lands. And these oil wells are so expensive. How does one man who never had money before, who was never from a rich family, who never had any connection to any rich family, just wake up and own an oil well? Like, they know how they share amongst themselves, but when they do so, they do it as a caucus, not as a tribe or as an ethnicity. But when they go out to make their campaigns and win votes for themselves, they know how to splinter off into their different ethnicities and win their votes for each other and come back again and regroup. So that's pretty much it.
The last kind of main question that I had for you is, what is the chances of a revolutionary movement succeeding to change things in Nigeria? Like, are you hopeful that things could change in
Uh,
Nigeria?
yes, but the only way it could really work for us is if we have an international, independent, non-affiliated government body that can come in and just observe as things are happening and report it back just as it's happening without any bias whatsoever. Because they want to box us in. Like their plan, I feel like the plan that the political elite has now is that they'd like to put us into such a cage of obscurity to the world, to where anything that happens in Nigeria, they control the narrative to the world so that people can't really understand just why and how these things are happening. So for it to happen, we need to have such a body that's live and on ground in Nigeria to witness and cover these events so that other people outside of Nigeria can understand why we do the things we do. If not, they could easily have help from other world powers to help stop the movements and the revolutions in Nigeria without these world powers knowing like, wait, we're fighting on the wrong side. And I think that's exactly what happened with the Civil War, because in as much as Ojukwu had like taken the East and like all these oil like dominated areas with him to Biafra, we should have never even gone to war. It was a case that the powers that be should have just said, you know what, let's call the Nigerian president, let's call the Biafran president, let's call Ojukwu into the office and broker a peace deal between these two without war. Now, this is something that the then head of states would not have wanted, because in his worldview, allowing the Igbos to leave Nigeria might set a precedent for other people to leave Nigeria too. Because if we had succeeded in doing so, it would have given other tribes who had stayed back as Nigeria to say, well, if nothing ever goes our way, or if we feel like this political setup or system doesn't work in our favor, then we'll always have the option of leaving, especially because we've seen it happen before and successfully too. So for the Nigerian elite now, it's more so like we've succeeded in turning the world against people who are innocent at a time where they should have actually fought against us as Nigeria. So the only way we can always succeed in what we have going on as far as exploiting Nigerians is to make sure that the narrative of what's going on in Nigeria is always controlled by the elites. And I feel like that's such a critical part to the revolution, because it could easily have people side against the people that they think are in the wrong, not knowing like you're actually upholding the powers. Now, if you think of like a lot of like comments concerning like Africa's relation to the West, you'll always hear people say like, well, like Europe doesn't want us to succeed, or like America has this like secret plan to like keep us in bondage or poverty or whatever the case may be. And to some American officials, like when you bring up this like concerns and these sentiments to them, they're always like confused. Even though like there's history of like the CIA and whatnot doing what they did with like the political leaders at the time, there's never been such a explicit show of like intent to dominate Africa, to make it seem like, oh well, this is a truth that no one can deny. If you get what I'm saying, like America has not come out to say like we would want to see African poverty. In fact, they sent aid to us in Nigeria, in South Africa, in other countries. Like America actually sends aid to us. So for me, who's in independence, like I think to myself, like, why would a country who like they claim wants to see us in squalor and suffering and finding ourselves actually give us aid when they could spend all that money on their own people? And then you have their own people over there too critiquing this like expenditure. Like, why are you giving them aid? Like, why are you helping them when you have people here that need this help too? So the way I see it is that they might actually want to help because they know like if they have more sovereign nations and less poverty in the world, then a lot of things will be stable as far as like migrations, trade, things will run so much smoother because they know like we have so many people that we can rely on and like call for help if we need help, or like have them like help us or do things like mutually, whether it be trade or sports or anything that you want to do with any other sovereign nation. Like you have more people you can do that with, and it's to make for a more safe and peaceful and entertaining world. But to us in Africa here, we don't see it that way because almost every time there's been such a revolutionary war or such a revolutionary stance against our political elite, the West has always backed the bigger government against the citizens. And it's only because they've always had the narrative shown to them by the political elite. They've always gotten their intel from people in power. So the only thing they know as far as Africa is what's being told to them. And who's doing the telling is who's controlling the narrative as far as how we organize ourselves and what the issues may be amongst us. For revolution to succeed, even anywhere in Africa, it'll take a transparent body to just come in, witness everything that's going on, even without the aid. Because I feel like it's not something that we might need help to like topple our governments, because we've done this before, like without like help from any government as far as like sending us guns or money or training or anything. Like we can, on our own, we can tackle them, we can fight the government and the powers that be. What we're really afraid of, though, is them running to the West and saying, look at the crisis I have in my country. This is what's really going on. And that narrative they tell them being a big lie that they use to win them on their side, and they use the support and the help that they are getting from them to stop these revolutions, and then pretend like this new system that they want to create is actually for everyone's benefit. When the Civil War had ended, one of the criticisms that Ojukwu had with the Nigerian war at the time was they used a lot of like help from the British, the French, and Russia, so much so that there are Igbo people you find today who think like these nations are just very much against us as an ethnicity. Being an independent, I ask myself, like, why? Like, what is it about us that will make all of these big nations want to like commit genocide against us? Like, this is different from like Hitler and the Jews, because that was him in his own country, with his own people, without any support from anyone else. And he made that decision to say, okay, now I want to commit this very grave act of violence against this group of people. But when you have people from outside joining in to such a thing, it begs the question, like, why? Like, for Hitler, like, he'll say, oh, well, the Jews did this to us, so this is the way we see them. That's why we did what we did amongst ourselves. I'm not justifying it, though, but I'm just saying, like, he did it on his own, and he took responsibility for doing it, that people in Germany could say, oh, well, that was Hitler and the Jews. Imagine it was like the French, the British, Russia, every other nation outside of Germany joining in to back Hitler in his genocide against the Jews. For the Jews, they ask themselves, like, why are all these countries against us? Like, what have we done to these other like bigger powers that will make them want to back a foreign, like make them back such a person against us? Like, if anything, you're supposed to be neutral. You're supposed to want to know how we even got to this point and how to bring everything to a standstill first before negotiations and conversations happen. So for Africa and Nigeria in particular, any revolution that's going to happen, it needs to be perceived by the outside world very transparently, so that they don't use the crisis or the revolution as it is to garner support from these bigger nations against us. Because we are the people, like we the people are much more powerful than the government of the day. But we know that when it comes to all of these negotiations, the government sent their delegates to go meet other delegates. There's never been a time where they said, let's go meet with the people. Let's have the people come out into this big arena and let's have this discussion with them and ask them why. We want to meet a delegate and a delegate. Let it be two delegates having this conversation. And if they send their delegate first to go see the West, everything they're going to tell them in the way that they will tell them is going to be against us, the people, so much so that it will bring everything we had to a standstill. That's the only way it can happen.
Are you hopeful that it can happen?
Yes, I think so. Because the next round of elections that are about to happen in 2027, the favorite candidate now for all Nigerians happens to be an Igbo man. And I think it's because most Nigerians are starting to like wake up into the reality, like, look, even if it takes them dominating, quote unquote, would better have, it's best for us to have that outcome and say like we're a prosperous nation than to play all these like ethnic and tribal games and lose out on everything. Because at the very least now we can say we're self-governing as Black people, and we're doing a good job of it as well. Instead of just saying like we have our man in that position, or like we have this Yoruba man here, blah, 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 and this ethnic group is in power, let us have someone we know for a fact who will build this nation for everyone, regardless of whose ethnicity gets the praise or whose ethnicity ends up on top in case of like appointments or who it favors in trade. Like, let's just have prosperity. Let's just raise the standard of living for ourselves. And because of that, when we come to the polls 2027, we're going to see a completely different mindset in Nigerians when it comes to voting, because now no one is buying the ethnic bias, no one is buying the ethnic sentiment. The only problem is, like I said before, the people in power have a ready army of people who are willing to go against the grain just to keep this political elite in power. So they're still controlling the narratives now. You know, any opposition that comes up to speak and criticize the government, they'll tag him jealous or looking to like take power through all kinds of means. And this is one of the means he's using. So when polls come 2027, if this man who we know from amongst us is the popular candidate to win, if he doesn't win, then it's going to set up very, very difficult conversations to be had as far as like the way forward now as a nation, because now we know that we can't trust our voting system, our electoral system to bring up the best candidate for us to lead us. And we must be able to come together as a people to like make a stance and say, all right, regardless of who is in power, like let this government work for us. Even if like our candidate doesn't win, like we want to see it work in our favor. And that's where the revolution will start, because now we're going to hold people accountable outside of like ethnic bias and say, I don't care if you're Yoruba, I don't care if you're outside, I don't care if you're Igbo, I don't care what tribe you're from. You have to do what's in our best interest because you're in our public office, you're in our position of power that we voted you in. You can only justify your position in government through our votes. So we should also have a say on how you're running this government, and we should be able to call you to order if we think you're going against what we voted you to do. But like I said earlier, like we still need that transparent body to do so, to come here and like witness everything, particularly during the election cycles, to come in and just like have a feel of how Nigerians are voting, like who is your candidate, why they're picking these people, like really go out to the streets and like have conversations with them, like why would you want to vote this candidate? Can you tell the camera like why you would pick this candidate over certain candidates, and hear like their reasons behind it, and then witness the results of the election and see if it tallies with what the majority of the people were saying. If it does, then we'll agree that we've succeeded in like overhauling the system and changing it to work for our benefit. If it doesn't, then also sit back and watch just the events that follow as we go into like challenge this new government and say, well, you still have to work for us, though. You still have to make everything improve for us because we're the ones you're serving. We're not here to serve yourselves. But I'll also add, though, like one of the possibilities that's bound to happen or could happen if we don't get this candidate that we think is a popular candidate is so many people may be tempted to retreat into their ethnic regions as a prequel to like wanting to secede, because now this is like our last big fight for like a united Nigeria. This is our last big fight as a united front, which is why people have put past their ethnic sentiments to pick an Igbo candidate as the popular favorite. If he doesn't win, then everyone sort of gets the memo, like it's almost impossible for us to achieve what we really want for ourselves, which is a higher standard of living, which is coming up to global standards of like living, first world standards, having like running transit systems, having good schools, having regulatory bodies that control our foods, good trade with other countries, peace with our neighbors in other countries, great international representation, doing away with all the stereotypes and bad or negative narratives that people have of us. We have to reach these goals outside of this setup. We must be able to make that decision and say, well, if we can't achieve these goals as a united Nigeria, then we must split to achieve these goals, but they must be met as a people. Just as West Africans, as coastal Africans, we must be able to come together within this region that we're in and say, this is what we want to set for ourselves as a standard that we meet. And I think that's one of the possibilities that's bound to happen. So if we don't get the candidates and if we don't have the revolution as a people against the powers that be, we're all just going to retreat to our different ethnic regions and say, let's just organize ourselves based on our ethnic identities and use this as a front to push for various secessions from Nigeria and say, let's go into our various groups and handle these issues of corruption and incompetency within our folds. Because it's easier for me as an Igbo man to call out another Igbo man and say, what you're doing now is wrong because you know we are your people. You know, these are our values, these are the goals we set for ourselves as a people. So it's easy for us to call them out without anyone else saying, oh, there's an ethnic bias or there's some other reason outside of what we're bringing to the table as the reasons for our calling whoever is in power out. And I feel like we can only get to this level either as a united front coming together to challenge the system, or we secede into our smaller groups and challenge in our little corners everyone else that's there who's in power. So those are the options that we have.
Chukwuka, thank you so much again for speaking with me on this subject. It was like incredibly fascinating to learn about how complicated Nigeria's corruption is. Kind of saddening, but like incredibly fascinating too. I really appreciate you taking the time.
No problem. You're welcome.
Hope.
And if you have any more like conversations you'd like to have, like I'm willing to raise your podcast.
Yeah, I'd love to keep in touch, and hopefully we can have another conversation. If we can find a way to do it in person too, like if I can find a way to get to Nigeria, or you can find a way to get to
the US,
that would be even better.
Yeah, no, I'm very much open to it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again, and we'll be in touch.